who's here. Okay. We're not going to see you in the morning again? What's going on?
Does he have a cousin of Cohen?
Yep.
Oh, no way. The way. Would not characterize that as good Gemara. Wait to find that Chatziyah and Chatziyah Chorin. Where is he?
Not an hour shiur, an hour balabats of it becomes a good.
All right. Anyway, without any further ado, we're on Daf Yud Aleph of Rav. Am Rav Shmuel bar Avduma, the second line. Zesh nichlas beis bet leknesses. Now, the truth is, this is not directly related to the Gemara prior, but it says a person who enters shul. Zesh nichlas is not referring to it. It sounds like it's referring to somebody who we're speaking about till now. It's not. Zesh nichlas beis leknesses. Somebody comes to the shul. Matzon under the tefillah. He sees them getting up for davening. Right, they're getting up to daven Shemona Esrei. If actually they're not getting up, they're standing in the middle of Shemona Esrei. If he knows that he can finish Shemona Esrei himself, starting now, be able to finish before the Shliach Tzibur gets to the critical Amen, which it is, we'll see in a minute. He should daven with them Shemona Esrei, in other words, Tefillah B'Tzibur. If he doesn't think he can finish with them in time to say the crucial Amen, he should not daven Shemona Esrei. Rather, he should wait until after they get to that critical Amen, and only then begin his own silent Shemona Esrei. And Shachris Mincha. Be'ezel Amen Amru. What Amen they're talking about? One says the Amen of Akel HaKadosh, and one says the Amen Shomei Tefillah, which of course is Dafka B'chol on a weekday, because on Shabbos there's no Shomei Tefillah. This was also brought down the Bavli. Technically, you're not supposed to start Shemona Esrei unless you know that you're going to be finished by the time they get to Akel HaKadosh, or Shomei Tefillah. Right, obviously Shemei Tefillah is afterwards, so therefore that the Amoru says Akel HaKadosh includes Shomei Tefillah. Amoru says Shomei Tefillah, it doesn't include Akel HaKadosh. Okay?
What about
Kedusha is not as important. It's the Amen.
don't we start, if we can't do it before they finish the Shemona Esrei, then the Shliach Tzibur start, don't we start the Shemona Esrei with the Shliach?
Yeah, that's an Eitzah. That's true. We're talking about it, he wants to daven by himself, not in tandem with the Shliach Tzibur. Yeah, you can have tandem with Shliach Tzibur. That's perfectly fine, but so about somebody doesn't want to do that. Taina Rabbi Yehuda Omer, getting back to the issue of our Mishnah, which was the issue of Nichum Avelim by a Kohen Gadol. Taina Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hayu Kulam Omdim B'Shura, when everybody's standing in a row in order to console the mourners, Mishum Kavod, those are just standing there because of Kavod, not Kavod for the Avelim, but their own Kavod. In other words, sometimes people stand in the public place to be knocking the Avelim because it looks good for them, right? They can say they were there, politicians, right? So they're Chayiv Kriyashma. They can't get out of Kriyashma. Mishum Ava, those are staying there bona fide for Nichum Avelim, they're Chayiv, they're part of Kriyashma. Oisik mitzvah, potter min mitzvah, right? Since about mitzvah being menachem, they're potter. Now the question is, it sounds here like the menachemim are stationary, right? The menachemim stand and the mourners pass through, which is actually the way we do it today, right? Right after the levaya, the mourners pass through the rows of avelim, right? However, from our Mishnah, it says, I'm sorry, I skipped. Yordul Usape, when they go down to Hesped, similarly, the good people are saying by Hesped, or Roin Pindim Peturim, those who are standing in front of the Maspid, right? They're involved in that, they're listening directly to Hesped, they're part of Rishma. Shein Roin Parim, those who are not standing in front of the Maspid, they're standing for the back. Of course, they really can't hear, I assume in the old days, so they're Chayiv in Kriya Shema. Now the question. It sounds like the Menachemim are stationary, right? What does it say? It says in our Mishnah, Menachem, Kohen Gadol's Menachem, Acherim, other people, Kol Am Oivrim Zechar Zeh, The entire nation passes by the Avelim, being consoling. And the Kohen Gadol, he has a buffer between him and the rest of the nation, which is the person in charge, right? But Lamaisa, what we see here is that it's the Menachemim who are moving, not the Avelim who are moving, right? So it's contradictory to our Mishnah and that Brisa which you just brought down. Says the Gemara, you know what? That's Commissioner Rishoya. That's the way things were originally done. But that which says that the Avelim are moving and the Menachemim are stationary. Commissioner Hari Shoina, it's like another Mishnah Rishoina. There's a Girs here Achroina, which come bring down, but it seems like it should be that there are two Mishnah Rishoinas. How so? Amrei China said, Rishoina at the very beginning, that the families would stand, right, meaning the Menachemim would stand, the Mishpachos came to Menachem, but Avelim would pass by like we do it today. Misharabu Tachrus. But then there was a lot of competition, which families would stand in front and which would stand in back. So with Tziporin, Skin Rabbi Yosef Shir Mishpachos service, so it made that the family should pass by, so that's why there wouldn't be so much, a fight over who stands where, right? Rishmuel said, the Sofafta at the end, things went back to the original minute, which is actually the way it is today. The way it is today, only we don't make such a big deal about it, but what it is today is we stand stationary where the Avelim pass through. So in any event, so there were three different stages, and the two different Mishnah Rishonas as to what the initial minute was. Okay? Melech, going from a Kohen Gadol to a king. Melech lo dan also king does not judge, nor is he judged. Now, this is the Rabbanan, not the Oraisa. The Oraisa, king is like anybody else. He'll be judged like anybody else, right? And judged like anybody else. But we had to read the first parak that a king doesn't sit in Sanhedrin because people are going to think that, he has all sorts of vested interest. There was about the Ibur Shona, right? He shouldn't sit there because he's going to make money on his mercenaries, having to feel, he can give them, get 13 months out of them instead of 12 months. But it sounds like it's the Rabbana, not the Oraisa. Okay? Lo made him else, he does not testify, nor do people testify against him. Lo cholitz, he doesn't do chalitza, lo cholitz in his ishto, nor does chalitza done to his wife. So his wife, once he dies, she's stuck. Right? Even if she never had any kids, she's stuck forever. Because not just lo cholitz, lo miyabim is ishto. No yibum either, right? If he wants to do chalitza and yibum, zoch lo tov, he can do it. Amrullah said, no, he can't forgo his covet. He's stuck. He cannot do yibum or chalitza. One does not marry his widow. His widow is, again, even if they have, whether she has kids or not. A king can marry the widow of another king. We found David married Shaul's Almana. Shneimar says, Hashem said to him, I'll give you your master's house, and your master's wives in your bosom. Okay?
Can't the widow of the Melech go out Mashuk?
Stuck.
Why not?
Not covered for the king. Okay. Doesn't matter. We're going to see in the Gemara. Doesn't matter. Okay? Well done. Says, well, you can't judge. Fox even see David O said Mishpat Sakal Chol Chesed Mishpat Sakal Chol Amo V'Temer Achein. He said, so David did Sakal Mishpat. Now there's three different shatim in how to read the next line of the Gemara. According to the Korban, the next line is a continuation of the question, right? And it's a question. He used to judge judgment, find meritorious and guilty. Ani, however, the guy was liable, wasn't ani. He would pay out of his own pocket. He would do din and tzedakah simultaneously. So it's all part of the question. Should David HaMelech judged, right? And there's no answer, right? It's kasha. What? Maybe Shlomo, what? Yeah, but then the case with the baby wasn't necessarily real judgment. It was like arbitration. Anyway, so that's all the kasha. According to Mashbiach B'nei Moshe, Mor Me'ata is I'm sorry, that was not the Korban Eidah. That was the Mashbiach B'nai Moshe. That's the way they interpret. According to Shai Teres Eretz Yisrael, the kasha is over after V'tei Marachain. And then there's a new drush about how David HaMelech used to do his judgment, right? But there's no answer either, right? According to the Korban Eidah, it's actually kasha and teretz. And I like the Korban Eidah. Lodon, and going back to the beginning more, Lodon v'oksiva David submission tzol cholam V'tei Marachain, and that the Gemara answers no. His judgment was a unique judgment. In other words, in his judgment, everybody came out all right, right? Because since he would pay back the ani if it was a poor guy, so it wasn't real judgment, right? He was more instilling peace than sitting in judgment. So that's the Gemara's emor me'at according to Korban Eidah is an answer. It's It was a unique situation. Okay? Be that as it may. Well, just agavurcha. We bring down here Joshua, which we had in the first paragraph already. Rabbi Omer Hoya Don Sadin. Done, if you judge properly and found the guy meritorious, the guy guilty. Malav Amok, the pasuk attributes you kilo also tzedakah, as if he did tzedakah, it should be imazaka with the meritorious guy, shichus lamana with because you gave him back his money, and tzedakah im hachayav, as you have in front of you, shows the gzeil miyada that you got the gzeil out of his hands. Okay? So in any event, the king is not done. David HaMelech was either unique or it's a kasha in which we don't have a teretz. Now, if it's a kasha which we don't have a teretz, again, as I said, the truth is, the Shai Teretz has a different spin on this, actually. I forgot to mention. Shai Teretz's spin on the issue, on the question, is that it's by him, it's, like I said, it's a dover pasha, it's only takana d'rabbanan. The Gemara's kasha is not how historically found David judging. Rather, since we find David judging, so it's like a milsa de mefurish bikra. It's like something explicit in the pasuk, and we know that Chazal never make takonas against explicit psukim in the Torah. So therefore, how could they make a takona that a king shouldn't judge or be judged if we find explicitly in Tanakh that David was judging? That's the way the Teshayat Yisrael learns the question. It's not a historical question, but rather a halachic question. That how can you possibly make a takana against that? But again, Lamaisa seems all takana d'Rabbanan, right? Not a d'Oraisa. All right? Says the Gemara further, Lo dayan, so we don't judge him. Al Shem, why don't we judge him? Al Shem, milfanecha mishme mishpati yetzei, because from before me your judgment comes. Now that's actually David HaMelech, from before you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my judgment will come. In other words, David says, I'm not responsible to any human court. I'm only responsible to God, and God will take care of me if I have to be taken care of. It's a b'shem Rebbe, it's a name Rebbe, HaMelech v'tzibur nidoin l'fanav b'chol yom. A king and the community are judged before HaKadosh Baruch Hu every day. Right? Not just on Rosh Hashanah. Individuals are judged on Rosh Hashanah. King and community every day. Shneimar says, "Laso mishpat amo avdo, mishpat amo Yisrael." Because Baruch Hu does the judgment of his eved, meaning the king, and the nation amo Yisrael, dvar yom b'yamo, each and every day. So unlike the melech, who's unlike Am Yisrael or the individuals once a year, by Am Yisrael and the melech, it's every day. Of course, from this, the whole concept of the king and Am Yisrael being one, the Rashi and Chumash is down, Hanasi who adore and adore who Hanasi. In other words, the generation is one with the king. Since the king represents the nation, so if the nation is judged every day, so to the king is got to be judged every day. It follows. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Meir Motzah lachlotzi abeim. Going to the next issue, if you want to he has the option. It's a wonderful thing. They said him can't do it because that would add damage to the honor of the king. You don't marry the amona or grusha of the king, right? Al Shem, because it says Vatiena tzloiros ad yoim mosan amonos chayos. When Abimelech rebelled against his father David, and when he took over Yerushalayim, Avshalom, not Avinoch, Avshalom, he rebelled against his father David. And when he took over Yerushalayim, it's not clear if he actually raped them, or he just believed, or he just pretended to, but he did something with David's Pilakshim. And so David, until David's death, did not consort with them. So they were live widows. Rabbi Yehuda bar Pazi b'shem Pazi b'shem Rabbi Yehuda said, "Malamid shel David mekaloson." David would dress them up, give their hair, give them fancy hairdos, umekashtasan, and adorn them, umachnisan in front of b'chol yom, and bring them in front of him every day. And you say to his Yitzhar Hara, "Ti'avta davar asulach," you desired something which was forbidden to you, which was Bathsheba. Chayecha shani mativcha. So by your life, in other words, David took an oath that he's going to forbid upon himself davar hamutalach, something which is permitted to you. So, in other words, technically they weren't forbidden to David because either they were raped by Avshalom or Avshalom didn't really do anything to them, but David refused to consort with them. Okay, wouldn't consort with them, and used them as a source of tshuva for Bathsheba. It's interesting. Yerushalmi and Reb Tzadok both say a very similar thing. Yerushalmi and Meshech Chochmah says they both ask, how could David, not have relations with them, right? They're his wives. He's chai to have relations with them. So Reb Tzadok says that by Bathsheba you have to have relations with her, because Bathsheba, it was his fault that she got into this mess. So therefore you couldn't just abandon her. But these Pilakshim, it wasn't his fault, it was Avshalom's fault. So therefore, it wasn't his requirement to keep the mitzvah of Oina with them. And therefore he did tshuva with them. He used them to do tshuva, Bosa Isha, Bosa Mokum, as close as he could, by committing, by doing this Nisayon with them, withstanding the Taiva. But you still need Reb Tzadok. Reb Tzadok says that even though it's a mitzvah to do ona, and he brings down the mitzvah laharnin leiv almona, to cause the heart of an almona to rejoice. They're not almonas, but they're his wives, so kavachomer, I guess, is supposed to cause them to rejoice. But nevertheless, there's no shibud of ona by a pilegish. So therefore, he wasn't required to have religion with them, and therefore he could test himself with them. Anyway, be that as it may, so these women were bringing down years that they were forbidden until the day of their death. What we want to point out is that even after David died, they were stuck. Nobody could marry them. Okay? So they weren't just stuck during David's lifetime. That was the chiddush of this Agadata. But they were stuck even after David would die because nobody could marry them. Rabban Gisarmin say, Asuras Mamish, they were literally forbidden to David. It wasn't that David tempted himself with them and they were really mutzah, they were literally usher to him. Why? Now here you really have to see the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer says in this, actually you have to see first the Radak and then the Chasam Sofer. The Radak is in the Chidushim. You see the bottom, there's something which says Chidushim. So the Radak in his parish, L'Shmuel, brings down every Gersa B'Shalmi B'Zel Loshem. This is the Gersa brings down. Rabban the case are Amri Asuras Mamish, literally usher. Why? Asuras Mamish Havu Umat Klei Hedyot Shenishtamish Bo Melech, a keli which originally began to belong to a hedyot. In other words, let's say a woman was married to a commoner and her husband died, and then the king can marry her, because king can do it. King can marry the Amona Grusha of a commoner, right? Also hedyot, then subsequently she becomes usher to a commoner, right? Because once the king dies to divorce her, she's been down a commoner. Kli Melech Shenishtamish Bo Hedyot, the keli of a king, which means these pilakshim, which were then used by a commoner, which is Avshalom. Eino din chaser is not a kavachomer that it's aser. So therefore, these women were mamish aser al pidin. And then he goes on to say, because it's about Tvus Aretz B'Sifro Divrei Yosef V'zel L'Shoinel, he writes about this Radak, and it's Kirsten Yerushalmi. V'akavana shebevade amonas hamelech, the widow of a king, or grushaso, or his divorcee, Av Shoysa B'Tchila Eishes Hedyot, even though originally she was the wife of the commoner, Asura L'Hedyot, she's forbidden to another commoner, Miacha Shekvar Yishtamish Melech, once the king is married to that woman. Mikosh came and certainly if initially she belonged to the king, that and then a commoner made use of them, it is embarrassing for the king. So David, even if Avshalom didn't rape them, if he didn't seduce them, Lamaisa, once he used them, they were forbidden to David again. Okay? So therefore David was not allowed, according to Rabban Kesarim, she couldn't actually take them back. Now, there's a amazing Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer says that it's lav dafka that he says it's lav dafka that was the usage of the hedyot, but rather Avshalom acquired this is not like the Radak. He wants to say why are they also, because if a hedyot would come, let's say, and rape the king's pilegish, so then the king or wife, the king could take it back. Again, not like the Chidush, the Radak's Girsa. Radak's Girsa once it's a bizarre and the king's not allowed to take it back. Chazim Sofer says you can take them back. Okay? She could take them back if they were raped or somehow degraded by a commoner. But here it's because Avshalom captured them in war. Since he captured them in war in rebellion against David, so Kibush Milchama Shmei Kibush. So he conquered them, he actually achieved ownership over them. Once he achieved ownership over them, it's like since they were only Pilakshim to begin with, so it's as if he married them. And since if he married them, so then they can't go back to David afterwards. It's amazing, Chazal Sefer. All right, but that's Chazal Sefer say. But according to Girsa, which of the Radak, which you don't have to come on to that, right? We say that the reason why they're also is because they were used by a hedyot. Not because he acquired them, but because they were used by Hedyot, so that's why they're forbidden to go back afterwards to the king. Okay? Says more further, weiter. Rabbi Yudan, Rabbi Yudan says, No se melch amonos melch. The king can marry the widow of a king. Shematzina b'David shenasa amonos Shaul. David married the widow of Shaul. Shneimar says that Noach is based out on that. I'm going to give you your master's house, and your master's wives in your bosom. Now here Chazal brings in one critical word, which it's important. It says it adds in the word v'rabbanan. What do Rabbanan say about this? Because Rabbanan say now a king cannot marry the widow of a previous king. He says zu Ritzpah. David married Ritzpah bas Aya. Ritzpah bas Aya was Shaul's pilegish. He couldn't only marry not Shaul's wives, or he could marry Shaul's pilegish. So Amel king cannot marry the widow of another king, only the Pilegish king. And of course, Abigail and Bathsheba are David's otherwise they're superfluous really to this commentary. What he means, Abigail and Bathsheba were married to David's other wives who were previously married before David married them, right? So there, of course, David could marry them because their prior husbands were commoners, right? But the Chiddush, the Ritzpah, which she had married to Shaul, David would not have been allowed to marry her, but she was only Pilegish to Shaul. So most of the stuff is not in the Bavli. Now, this for sure is not in the Bavli. I actually had to look up Psukim and Divrei Yomim for this, which is quite painful. Chetzon had 3 kids. You'll see it says, Ubnei Chetzon Yerachmiel, Vesram, Veskaluvi. Now, Kaluvi is the fellow known to us as Kolev. Okay? So Kolev had 2 brothers. Kolev ben Yefune had 2 brothers, Yerachmiel and Ron. Now, the Gemara asks a question, but the basic question is missing here. The Gemara's question is that later on in the Psukim it says, when it lists the genealogies, later on, first comes Ram, and then comes Kolev, and then comes Yerachmiel. Yerachmiel's genealogy is listed last. So I ask you, the Gemara, it should be, V'hoi Yerachmiel Kod Moi, Yerachmiel was the firstborn, so why is progeny listed last? He married a Goyish wife, a Shiksa, to be his trophy wife. So he's castigated because now it seems he might have converted her, but still, one doesn't like it then. The Chesiv says, he had an other wife, right? That other wife is Ushma Atorah. Her name was Atorah. I don't know why anybody would name their wife Atara after this. My wife named their daughter Atorah after this, but she was taken as a trophy wife for him, right? He aim onam, and she was the mother of Onam. She chnisa Adnino toch beis, so she brought Adninus into his house because, obviously the other wives were upset that the shiksa was moving in, right? Anyway, be that as it may. Now, this is being brought down because Novel HaKarmeli was Abigail's husband. It's not clear from the Gemara. It took me a lot of time to figure this out from the name Moshe. Novel HaKarmeli was Abigail's wife. Well, Abigail's first husband, held that he was the most chashva, most miyuchas dika Zion of the house of Chetzron. Why? Because in Yerachmiel's house they had a blemish of intermarriage. That's Torah. She was the shiksa, right? And in Ram's house they also had a blemish of intermarriage. Who, as we shall see, who was Boaz, who married Ruth, right? That's also intermarriage. For Ram it says, "V'Ram olidus Aminadav, v'Aminadav olidus Nachshon." It's actually not what the Psukim say, but this is an abbreviation of Psukim. V'Nachshon olidus Shalma, v'Salmon olidus Boaz, Boaz nasas Rus. So Novel said, Carmeli said, "Asim the Kluvoi." Novel came from Kluvoi. He came from Kolel. And Ataka says in the pasuk in Shmuel, where we have the story of David coming to Novel's house, that it says there, Novel is a Kluvoi. So what does it mean is a Kluvoi? He said, I'm from Kalev, I'm superior to all the rest of these guys. So obviously he'll look down at David, because David came from one of the other houses of Chetzron, one of the inferior lineages of Chetzron. Okay? So Vishmat David, now, Novel's a hardy guy. Vishmat, do you remember the story of Novel, by the way, at all?
From your shiur?
From Shmuel, do you remember the story at all? Very vaguely. Okay, so David comes. There's a Tanakh right here somewhere. Who? Oh no. No. Only because Abigail restrained him. He wanted to do all sorts of mess.
He didn't do what he wanted.
Yeah, he wanted. Okay. Anyway, the way it works here is that. There was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. The man was very wealthy. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. The following once happened at the shearing of the sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man was difficult and an evildoer. He was a descendant of Caleb. Okay? David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing sheep. So David sent 10 attendants, and that David said to the attendants, "Go up to Carmel and approach Nabal, inquiring after his welfare in my name, and say, such success for life. Peace be upon you, peace upon your household, and peace upon all that is yours. And now I have heard that they are shearing for you. Now your shepherds stayed with us, and we did not shame them, and they did not lack anything all the days they were in Carmel. Ask your attendants, and they will tell you so. Therefore let my attendants find favor in your eyes, for we have come because of your celebration. Please give whatever you can to your servants and to your son, to David." Okay? That's what he wanted, okay? David's attendants came and spoke in accordance to all these words to Nabal in David's name, and then rested. Nabal replied to David's servants and said, "Who is David and who is the son of Jesse? These days the rebellious servants have increased, each against his master. Shall I take from my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered from my shearers and give them to men about whose origin I do not know?" Okay? That's the story up till what we need to know for the next few minutes. Anyway, so says Gemara, Amar Nova says, "Leis Bishol Bar Tavin Sagin, it should be Mini." There's no better person than me in Ram Yisrael. Although this is how it says, "Vish b'Maon," he is a person Maon, Maaseh Carmel, and he had dealings in Carmel. Vish Gadol, he was very big, meaning he was big, very haughty. Okay. Vu Kluvoi says Kluvoi to Hasimikoli. That's included. He took pride in the genealogy lineage from Koli. Vaishmata Biba Barki goes to his novel. David in the desert, that novel is doing the shearings. He said, "V'amartim kol chai," say to that's that language, such success for life. So that what it means is humor. He wished him life. V'ata shalom v'gom. It said, "You be at peace," etc. Then it says that they came to that they were Vayanuchu. It says that there it says David then came and spoke in accordance to all these words to David, David's name, and then rested. Vayanuchu. So we darshan that here, Vayinuchu, Amr Yusuf Bashunam Nasu Machane, they became an encampment. Two ways of learning that. One is the way that unfortunately here they became a warrior encampment, meaning that they were threatening to Novo. The other way of interpreting, which I think is more correct, although I'm making it up, is that they became a Sanhedrin. They sat in they're going to sit in some judgment. As it says, David David was what's the word? He was chutzpah. Okay. So now they have to judge him, right? How do we know that by judgment you start from the side, meaning from the lesser people? It's from this Gemara over here. It says David from this Tanakh. David said to each man gird his sword. Okay, each man girded his sword, and David too girded his sword. So girding his sword, we learn, means that they went to judgment. Okay, so who judged? David only girded on his sword last. Okay, so we came last. So therefore, obviously, from there we say it didn't push to start from the lowest and go to the highest. Okay, now Vayod Bam. The next thing we dash is Vayod Bam. It says in Pasuk Yudal, it says, one young man from the attendants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, behold, David sent messengers from the wilderness of Greater Master, and he drove them off. But it's Vayot. So what's Vayot mean? So it says, he cast them away with verbal taunts. Now, so that person told Abigail, now know and go and do what, it says, Pasuk Yud Zayin, it says, and now be aware and determine what to do, for the evil decrees we made final against our master and against the entire household, and he himself is too base a person even to talk to. So Abigail had to do something. So what did she do? So she went down to meet David, and she brought him a gift, right? And says there in verse 20, then it happened as she was riding on the donkey clandestinely, descending the mountain. Behold, David's men were descending the other mountain toward her, and she met them. Okay? So here it says, she met them. Tivkoshasam. Gila Shoka. So she revealed her thigh, Vochalora, and David's men all went by the light of her thigh. Vativkoshasam, she met up with them. So Vativkoshasam, we darshan, although I would darshan if it were up to me, that Yardim Likrasa, the language of Likrasa, but here it seems like the darshan Vativkoshasam, anyway, Hukrukulam, they all became Balikari. Why? Because they saw her thigh. In the old days, it wasn't like today. They weren't used to seeing those things. So anyway, so they became Balikari. Okay? So, David said, Achlo Sheker Shamarti. So David got David was upset. David said to her, it was for naught that I guard all these man's possessions in the desert. There was not missing anything from all that belonged to him. He has repaid my kindness with evil. Such shall God do to David's enemies, and shall he do further, if he'll leave until morning of all that belongs to him, so much as one that urinates against the wall. Okay? So one that urinates against the wall, who's that? So, says the Gemara, David Amar Achosher Shemari B'Gorim Mashti Mekir Ma Iske the Kalpa Mashti Mekosla. Well, who urinates against the wall? They didn't have fire hydrants in the old days, right? So dogs. Even a dog, I'm not going to have mercy, right? So David says, I'm going to annihilate them. So, Vatira Abigail's David Gomer. It says, the Abigail saw David, and she came towards him. She said, Amalei, she said to him, Moida, Master David, Ana ma of these. What did I do? You're going to kill even up to the dogs. You're going to kill me. But now my children, what do they do? Pirai, my sheep, what they do? Amar Allah, so he said to her, Mibnei Shekil Machus David, because he cursed the kingship of David. So therefore he deserves anything else. He's a murdered b'machus. Amar Allah, so she said to him, God said to David, what do you rate, the king? Amar Allah, so he retorted, anointed me the king. Amar Allah, so she said, Adai monita demboran sholokayim. The reputation of our master Shaul still survives, meaning you're not well yet known to be the king, right? Vani amaschecha. She says, I am your maidservant. Melamed Shetovel attachment. She teaches us that David wanted to have relations with her. So she said, I can't be your wife. I can be your maidservant, but not your wife. So she refused to have relations with him. Miyado tzia kitzman, in order to then, next thing she did, is she took out a kesem. No, she had a neither shaila. Baras and she showed it to him. Now this is either to deter him from relations, because if she's a neither, it's not going to want to have relations with her, or it's in order to make the following point. Shamar Allah, he said to her, does one look at Somim at night? You have to look at it during the day, I can't see. So she said, she said to him, don't you hear what you're saying? You don't look at needle stains at night. You're going to judge capital punishment at night? She said, I'm already talking about during the day. She said, there should not be for you a stumbling block. Says what she says, what she meant to say, there are all sorts of questionable things there, meaning you ties a mari b'malchus, but I just showed you, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with mari b'malchus. So therefore, your judgment during the day was improper. So you have to judge again. You can't judge at night. Okay. Rabbi Levi have a parsha. Rabbi Levi was learning over this parsha of David. But Rabbi Zira told the Chavraya, the Talmidim, Alum Shami called Rabbi Levi Dorish. Go up and hear the voice of Rabbi Levi Darshni. Leis Efshar lay. It's not possible to mafka parsha so lo rivon that to learn a parsha without saying a chiddush. All umar lo. So they went in and he said to them, lo. It doesn't say lo tiazos lupuka. It says villo. The Shaitan puts in the word lo villo. It's an extra vav. So for this we darshan. What do we darshan? We'll see in a minute. Sham Rabbi Zira heard that he said, Umar Appa Garata Yisrael. He say, even a Garata could say Chidushim. What's Chidushim? Lepuka, Pikpuket Varam Yerushalmi. One darsha is Lepuka, that there were questions about the judgment. Then, with the extra vav we darshan, Amar Lo, he said, Amar Le, she said to him, Katek Pukpak Bekusach, when your reputation spreads, right? In other words, when you become well known, when things go around about you, they're going to say about you, they're going to say that you're a murderer, so don't do this. This is not good for you, right? Besides the din and partials issue, it's bad for your reputation, bad public policy. And she said to many things. She said, she said, Loti azoslo lo cholapuka ulemichsho leiv latoni lishpoch dam chinam. There should not be for you a stumbling block and a moral hindrance for my Lord to have shed innocent blood from my Lord to avenge yourself. So she mentioned two things: a moral hindrance and lishpoch dam. So she said some amazing things. She said, "Ato emeli kosho b'eishasish." You're going to be nechshal and eishasish. Where's that? Batsheva. No, it's a nevuah. You're going to be over an eishasish. Now, one had butav achas l'shtayim. Better they should only be able to say one lashon hara about you, not two, because otherwise it's going to say you're a violation ish and a shefech damim, right? Atida ruba min hador maisei, and also she said to him, the eishasish which is coming is worse than this one, right? Meaning you could be nichshal with me too. Better to be, but I know you're going to be stuck with that one, right? So lote da vida. It's vida. It's with the base of chain with a vav. It says where it's at least only should be only one eshesish. So you said not two. So therefore, just one. The one in the future, not two, and also not shofech damim. Okay, so let's avoid whatever we can. She's trying to safeguard his reputation. Okay? Oymer atolim locha Yisrael. Ve'ein oimrim alecha shofech damim mato. And they're going to say about the Yuli shofech damim, better not that they should say also Eshes Ish. Better they shouldn't say that. And on the other hand, she said that Eshes Ish they're going to say, well, better they should only say one and not two. It's probably some tikkun in the girsa required here, because better, it seems, at one point it seems better one and not two means you should only say shayfech damim and not Eshes Ish. At the other point it seems like you're saying they should only say you had one Eshes Ish and not two. So it's not clear exactly what, but you get the idea, right? She's trying to diminish the iniquities of David. Okay? Says the Gemara, the Tamar, that which you said, that which you said, that Taina, that's not valid. Again, as we said, you're lacking your chair. There's an amazing medal which was brought down here by the Amudei Yerushalmi and the Yerushalmi, and they go nuts over it. It's here, it says that the Medrash says that David held that he was allowed to have relations with Abigail because she was like the novel was a murder of Malchus, as if he was already dead. He was already dead, so therefore his wife is mutter to him. It's amazing. They say, not already dead yet, right? Even a person who's about to be executed, his wife is still not mutter to get remarried. It ain't over till it's over, right? So they go crazy on this marriage. So the Mashgiach says a very nice thing. It's a very nice chap. He says, of course that's sheker. But David was told this was the truth by Doeg and Achi Teifel, who were the members of his merry band here. And they were Doeg really wasn't, Achi Teifel was. But Doeg was Rishol probably. But he was told this by people who were out to get him. They intentionally intended to mess him up and get him to do this Maisa with Abigail in order that people should say, oh, he's Boel Eshes Ish. In fact, that was the wrong halacha they were telling him, but David believed them that was actually the case. So that, anyway, Abigail said, anyway, even if it's true that technically Marim Malchus is Chayav Mitzvah and as if he's dead, but you still don't have a din of Melech because you're not well known yet in the world. Okay? Anyway, at the end, what? No, because there's another king now. Shaul is the real king. Yeah, Shaul is still king.
Did he even know that Nabal didn't know that?
No, probably not. No, it was a private ceremony. Yeah.
So,
right, absolutely.
And technically, he wasn't a Morid.
Right. That's what Abigail was saying. Even though technically Morid Malchus, in fact, it's not Morid Malchus. That's what I'm saying. Okay, but at the end, Abigail loses a little bit. She says, "Remember me." Okay, which means hint, hint. B'chol kraya in the entire parasha, Abigail with 2 yuds. B'armei odem pesuk, except for this last pasuk, where Abigail with only 1 yud. Baruch Hashem Mekoymer. Mibo v'damim, you prevented me from coming in blood. It says there. Damim is plural. Damnido shvichus damim. He's not moed on the Eshes Ish Taina because he's still over this thing that it's as if he's dead, right? But you save me from Damnido because you have a kesem, and you save me from shvichus damim. So you should koyach on that. Okay. Meis lemeis. When a king has relative who dies, any it's a peasant paltrin, so he can't leave his palace. If he wants to leave, go behind the coffin, he can. Yotzi. David followed the coffin of Abner. It says, they said, it was a raw show, it was a one-time thing, because he had to convince the nation that he was not behind Abner's death. So when they come to console him, everybody sits on the ground. She sits on a little cushion, a little low bench. Now, it says more Damar, though it seems that he sits on a little bench. Darga should be it sounds like that there is no concept of Kriyas Mita by a Darga. You don't have to lower it. Says more no. And with the Shadis throws in the line there, if you say Dargash has to be lowered, a king is not required to lower his seat. East Tani, those learned by Leviah. It's an interesting issue, and this is not in the Bavli. East Tani, women go first behind the coffin, women go behind the coffin and men behind them. These Tani, those who learn, which is the way, of course, we do it today. First men, now this is not a feminist thing, mind that, of course not. Right?
men are not supposed to walk behind.
Oh, that's more says. He says women go first. Shane Gorman let them follow the coffin, because who caused death to come to the world? Women, right. So it's not a coffin to go first. Those who say Anoshim go first. This is a cover talk to women, interesting. They cover B'nos Yisrael. That men shouldn't follow them and, leer at their movements. Okay? Roxy, wait a minute, it does say V'melech David holech achrei hamita. Doesn't say David followed followed the bed. Now it says that the riots from the end of the pasuk. The end of the pasuk says Vayeda kol ha'am. It says all the people knew. It says Vayeda kol ha'am b'chol Yisrael. All the people knew, and all of Am Yisrael knew that the king didn't have in mind to kill David. So who's the people? Who's the Am? It says Yisrael. So the people obviously means the women, right? So it sounds like the women are immediately behind the coffin, right? Because there's Vayeda kol ha'am b'chol Yisrael, right? It says Amalo. So they said Lo Yadav Elafayis. It just means he went back and forth between the two groups. It doesn't mean who was where in the procession. It means he went back and forth. Mandam Faisla, Minda should be Min probably. Mindava Faisla Nishaya. Once he went to the women, Hav Faisla went to the men. Mandava Faisla went to the men. Hav Faisla Nishaya. The point is he went back and forth between the two groups. Okay? Ksiv, it says, now, total shift of gears. And this is more or less parallel in the Bible, but not completely. But it saved David, it says, David turned, and this is when David brought the Aron up to Yerushalmi. And Moshe brings down the whole pasuk. David went to bless his household. And David Michal came to see David. And he was really, dancing around, really, wild. And she said, she made a sarcastic comment. How glorious this day! It's day. Melech Yisrael, the King of Israel. Asher Nigla Hayom was revealed today to his maidservants, like one of the Nigolos Echam Me'arekim, like one of the empty ones, right? Mao Echam like one of the empty ones. Amar Rabbi Bo Bakana, Arekim Sharekim, the empties of the empties, Zu Akstastis. So Lieberman was where last time we had this in Sukkah or somewhere like that. I don't remember what it was last time. But somebody said it's a clown. Amarlo, so he was dancing like a clown. Amarlo, so he said, Ayom Nikle Kove Beis Abba. Today was revealed the honor of my father's house, not yours. You are not honored. Ooh, low blow, right? Amarlo of Abe Show, they said in the house of Show that they were very, very tzanua. Shaloro so, lo ekev lo go, they never saw by them not a heel and not a toe, miyameim. Remember, this is the days before people wore socks, but they wore long skirts in order people would not see their heels or toes, right? The Chesiv says, Vayavo, although Chesiv that which it says, Vayavo Gidros Sod. When Shaul had to go attend to his needs, he went behind fences of sheep. Rabun Bar Lezer said, there was a fence behind the fence. Shaul came to shelter his legs. That's a euphemism for going to attend his needs. So David was watching. It was one of the times that David was laying an ambush for Shaul. Lifting up his skirts a little, the inner skirts, and lowering his outer skirts in order to keep to defecate b'tznius. Amar said, "Arur magaba hadein tzniya." Curses somebody who touches such a modest person. Although the Amar says, today you saw I could have gotten you. It doesn't say then I had mercy upon you and it had mercy upon you. What's it? I personally would have killed you, but the tznius which you have, that's what saved you. Okay? So David said to Michal, he said, this is tough. This is what I'm going to do. Concerning those maidservants you mentioned, I'll find your cover, my cover them. Shane and Amos, don't call them maidservants, Elimos matriarchs. Ubamen and how was she punished? She had no kids. Voxy didn't say Vashishi, the sixth wife was Yitra'am, or the sixth child was Yitra'am. Leglo Ishto, was Yitram to Egloh's wife, and we know that Eglah was Michal. It says Gemara, why she called Eglah Elishagosk Eglah Mesa? She brayed like a cow, and she died. Meaning that she had a kid, but on the day she died, not prior to that. Okay, she died in childbirth. Nobody was degraded himself mitzvahs more than David. Name mitzvahs. Why? Because people look at the Aron and they would die. Now the Pnei Moshe and the Korban have a pshat which I don't like. The pshat I would like to say is that he wanted to distract them from looking at the Aron, because people used to look at the Aron and die, because the Aron was very holy. So in order to distract their attention, he made a spectacle of himself. People should look at him and not at the Aron. Okay? Where does it say the Hashem smote those who the Aron? See if it says earlier, Vayach be'anshe Beit Shemesh, he smote the people of Beit Shemesh, because they looked at the Aron. By Beit Shemesh it says, Vayach b'am shivim ish, he smote 70 people, Zu Sanhedrin. And then it's Chamishim Mel, 50,000, not he smote an additional 50,000, these 70 Mer Sanhedrin were equivalent to 50,000 Jews. V'chadar once said, Vayach b'am shivim ish, there's Sanhedrin, he smote Sanhedrin, and Chamishim Mel, besides that of Amoritz. Okay, so he smote them as well. Ksiv, it says, Shir Amal David, Hashem lo gavali bi, my heart was not holy, b'shashim ashchei shmo and shmo anointed me. V'lorama I my eyes and I have lifted, b'shashah rakti as glass when I killed Goliath. V'lo lachti b'gdolas and didn't go into haughtiness, b'shashah lesi baram brought the Aron up, we've lost many, nor were in wonders from me, b'shashah malchus, when they put me back from my malchus, after the case of Hashem, I was always humble. Ella, rather, Lo Shivisi, if they're not equate with Amanti, myself, I not make myself equanimical. I don't know exactly what you say in English. I treat myself with equanimity. The Amanti, and it was silent and restrained. In other words, I never was tended to be haughty, like a young child upon its mother. Like a young child was my soul upon myself. Like a young child should be. The Kiro Lord and change the Girsa, the Yonik Mitadye Ime, who nurses from his mother's breast, that was completely is dependent on his mother. Canabes Nafshe Alai, so too was my soul upon me. I always saw myself completely contingent upon you and never was haughty unto myself. Okay? A king takes out to optional warfare, based on a basin of 71. And he can break a way, open a highway, and nobody can protest. The highway of a king has no limit. Everybody loots the nose in front of him, and they put in front of him where she takes first. How do we know that he has to ask Sanhedrin? It says, it says on the basis of Elazar's statement, they will go out and come in into war, but then it says, and Lazar has to go with all of Amisol and all of the Eidah, meaning they have to consult the Sanhedrin. So it's Yoshua. Yoshua went with Elazar and Kol Eidah, in other words, he had to consult the Sanhedrin before he took Amisol out to war, and also Elazar the Kohen Gadol, the word B'tumim. Okay? He can first open a way. You'll see it says, first of all, we learn about the loot. Is when David waged war against Amalek. It says they took the sheep and put it in front. They said this is the loot of David, so David gets first. Who are you? I'm David Bevis Damim. Now there's a whole elaborate conversation about another paragraph in Divrei Yomim, which I also have to look up. Who are you? David Bevis Damim. He was with David in Eves Damim. What is Eves Damim? And this is a pasuk. A pasuk of Divrei Yomim. Rabbi Yochanan Bar Kalsum Kata. It was a red field, meaning a field of lentils. That there they desisted from having to pay money. What's the case was in on our base. But the Philistines gathered there in this field. Now here they should bring down the last line over here. The Mashbiach puts it over here. Last line says, one part says, it was a field full of barley. Another part says, it was full of lentils. Going back to where we were, So for the bottom, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Amar Adoshim are there are lentils there. El Shoytzah Nova Shlem Yofik Shel Sarim. Their clusters were beautiful like barley clusters. Rabbi Levi said another shot. The Philistines there are likened to Shayu Boim Skumisar, and they came upright like barley. Lochem Lemuchim Kadosh, and they went down low like lentils. Rav Shua Bar Nachman, going to the last few words on the page. Rav Shua Nachman Amar Shana Achas. There was 1 year, or maybe it should be Sada Achas, 1 field. V'shtei Sada Sayu, of which there were 2 fields. Achas Sarim Achas Adoshim. 1 was barley, 1 was lentils. Now Pshita Leil Avid Nazim David. David assumed he could destroy the fields in order to fight against the Philistines and pay. But Dilma Pshita Leil, this is the question which he had, which was also he wanted to resolve, was, no, it's not necessarily Pshita, but he had this question, perhaps he could destroy and not pay. Because what our Mishnah says, right? Because Melech Oselo Derech B'chol Makom. Eizmem Yovad. But he didn't have to do both. So therefore, even though he could make a derech, he didn't have to make a derech in both. But he wanted to anyway. So he decided, 1 I'm going to pay, and 1 I'm not going to pay. Okay? 1 I'm going to destroy, Ezemim Yava, 1 I'm going to destroy and not pay. Ezemim Yitain Domi. Right? And which are going to pay for? Shel Adoshim and Shel Sarim, and 1 was barley and 1 was lentils. El Shel Adoshim, on the one hand, Adoshim is Machal Adam. That's human food. V'Shel Sarim Machal Behema, and barley is Machal Behema. So Adoshim spirit. On the other hand, Adoshim in a chayeves b'chala. The one made of Adoshim was chayim and chala, right? It was not chayim and chala. Sorry. Shosar chayeves chala tzrayim b'chala. Besides that, Adoshim ain't oimer bomimena. Adoshim you can't bring home the korban omer from lentils. Sorry, or bomimena you can bring a korban omer from barley, right? Which you do. So which one should he destroy? Which one should he pay for? Now, again, this is very unclear, right? Lamaisa, it's possible that that it sounds like really he didn't have to destroy both, right? He only had to destroy 1, the other one he could trample. It's not clear exactly, though. It's very unclear what a shiloh was. It's patched. The way to gloss over it is it was asking all the shilohs at once. Can I destroy it without paying? With paying? Because bikoch nefesh. Because the Gemara says, also there's a sheet in the Bavli which is alluded to in Yerushalmi. You can't save yourself by stealing money from somebody else. So maybe he can't trample it. Maybe he can't, even if he wants to pay. Maybe he could trample it and not pay, right? Because melech poretz lasus lo getter. If he can, which one should he do? Which one should go first? And which one? And if he can't, should he take 1 and pay for the other? All of these are part and parcel of this shiloh. It was a very complex question, right? So it says, Rabbanan says, Soda achas ushtei shonim hoyu. Rabbanan says, which is much easier to learn. And in fact, the Mashbiach puts this line, Rabbanan Amrin, Soda achas ushtei shonim hoyu, on top, before this case of the 2 fields. In other words, and this makes it much simpler. If you say that this was his question, then it's much simpler. If it's 2 years, in other words, the first year was lentils, and the next year is barley. And then he has a clear, can I learn, last year they passed it for me, I can make a way through this. And I don't even have to pay. But can I extrapolate from last year to this year? And that he had a suffix. Because last year, maybe lentils are better, but maybe barley is better. So that was in Shiloh. So the truth is, you put Rabbanan on top before the question of what's better, then it makes much more sense. Because then he could say that the question is whether he can infer from last year to this year. Okay? Why did you learn out from last year? Because you don't learn from 1 year to the other year. Anyway, the bottom line is that David stood inside the portion with his men, and they say that they didn't destroy it. Even though they could have, they decided not to. Because of Echromer, one pasuk says Vayatzi Luha. Because of Echromer means Vayatzi without the bow. Elamalamed, it teaches us the extra vav, shechzir l'ba'aleh. Not only did they say it, but they gave it back to its original owner. And since it was saved from almost certain destruction, it's a chaviv l'kastem l'karkum, like as if it was a saffron field. It was very precious by him, because saffron is a very expensive field. And he was so grateful that his field was saved. Ksiv, it says, Vayisav David l'ma, David had a taiva. Vayomer mishkeni mayim yibar wanted water from the well in Beis Lechem. And the Bible gives an allegorical interpretation of this episode in Divrei Yomim that he wanted to know the halacha, which we discussed previously. Rabbi Chia Barba Amar halacha t'chol. Here the Yerushalmi mimics it and says, but much briefer. It says they needed halacha. Vayivku shlosha, so he took 3 of his chachamim to the turn halacha. I wasn't a basin issue. You need 3 people in order to clarify halacha. The law about David Dishtos, when they passed the law, David didn't want to drink. I mean, law about David Sheikot, there in the Bible it says they were Moiser Nefesh to get the halacha. And we don't mention people who are Moiser Nefesh, don't mention them by name when they're passing halacha. But here it seems much more, slightly different. It says, when they paskin, David refused to accept that the halacha should be mentioned in his name because they paskin the question. So if he made it a meseches to Hashem, meaning Kov Meseches Adoros, he made an anonymous halacha for all generations without mentioning. We don't know who specifically said it, and David did not take any credit for it. We're not finished with this. It's a very confusing Gemara, but we're not finished. So there he breaks open away. Bar Kapara Omar Chag Hoya. He says the different spin in this whole sugya. He says it was sukkahs, nisuch mayim, and they needed water literally to do nisuch mayim. Ve'eter b'maya. It was time when you could do nisuch mayim at a bama. You didn't have to go actually to the Beis Hamikdash. Va'avaku shleisha. So 3 people went to get the water. By the way, this is not in the Bible. The Lama Shleisha, why? Echad Hareg went to kill the Philistines. Ve'lam Fanarug went to move the dead Philistines, so there shouldn't be matami the water from Nisuch HaMayim. Ve'echad Machditz Tochas B'tar. One would bring in the water to keep it torn. Chas of Echad Hareg, one pasuk says, Vayinasech Osam Hashem. He poured them out as a libation to God. Chas of Echad Hareg, Vayosech. It doesn't sound like the same word. Manamar Vayosech. He learns the psukim allegorical. They need to learn halacha, and he sent these chachamim to learn this halacha, and they were Moiser Nefesh to learn the halacha, and that's like through the previous story of the fields, what the story is, whether you can be matzlam, whether you can pirates derech, which one field to use. Anyway, it was an allegorical thing. The other one, Mandamar says, no, they literally went to get water. Mandamar Vayinase, they say Bar Kapara is literal story. Rabbi B'Shem Rabbi Yossi said another interpretation of the allegory. Hilcha Shvuim Nitzacholo. They down in National Bor, there's some Bor, has to do Shvuim. By Yosef it says by Yotzim also about Bor, right? So you not a loch on Pidyon Shvuim you have to learn out. And that's what they went to clarify. And the other Rabbi Shimon Bar Rebbe Omer, Binyan Beis HaMikdash Nisavelo. It was initially had to do with Binyan Beis HaMikdash. And he dodges out from the language of it was in Ephras, and Ephras has to do with the Beis HaMikdash. The whole log thing, which is brought down here by the Gilead of Ephraim, we won't get into it right now because I really want to get to Amar Aleph. I'm going to cheat. You can only have 18 wives. Okay. And remember, you can have many more. As long as they don't lead his heart astray. Shimon Omer, even one being Mesiras Liba Arelo, he said he can't marry. He came Loma Namar, so why say he can't marry many? Even like Konios, no more than 18. You can only have horses according to his chariot. Because of us, you should have lots of money. They should say have signing only enough for mercenaries. Because the Lord Sefer Torah writes to Sefer Torah for his name. For his own personal Sefer Torah, even though he has one which he inherited. Yotzim Mechami goes at the war for Imo, the Sefer Torah goes with him. Nichlas, he comes back with Imo, it's with him. Yoshib B'din, sits in judgment, so it's with him. Mesav, he reclines, will connect, do its opposite. Shema says, Voice above a car, Bokoi Mechayiv, he does it, so he has it with him his entire life. Any Rochim Elsu, so you can't ride on the king's horse. Yoshib can't sit on his throne. Maybe Shtaim Shem Shavit, you can't use a scepter. You can't see him naked. Look, she was stopping, no when he gets a shave. Lo beis hamerchat's floor, nor in the bathhouse. Shneimar says, "Som tasim alech melech, shetei mosar alech," should be afraid of him. Rav Kana Amar al Shem Hashishi Yitreim Le'eglo. At that time, we're learning that pasuk is he had 6 children, 1 per each of his 6 wives, and the Maksiv there it says about that. Tamon, if that's too little, I'll give you 3 times as many. 6 and 6 and 6 you have, and so 6 again and 6 again. Now Maisi married more women than the 6, because Bathsheba he married later on, but the pasuk saying limiting him to 18 altogether. Hashem vayakadav is korech. When David conquered chariots which are unnecessary, he what's the word? He took off the horses' hoofs because he's not supposed to have so many horses because of halacha. So Shiloh, I think the Yerushalmi Sanhedrin asked about Tashkus. How can you do that to the horses? Okay, not for me. The case of Zovli Abel Knei Absanya, only for his mercenaries. Only for this year, not for next year. Each year independently. Amar Rabbi Yachol, it's probably somebody's name missing here. Shlomo, King Solomon, Shlosha Dvarim Sheshachka Aleim Midas Adin Chilaltim. 3 things which the Midas Adin made a mockery of, meaning 3 things which he was. 3 things. Actually, I don't know how to translate that. That's where I know how to translate. Anyway, 3 things. It's pretty much says the pasuk says, it calls the schok amarti muhulo. So that which the pasuk made a mockery of, it said, don't do. I defiled them. That's about Shechilaltim. And those are 3 things about Noshim, Susim, and Kesef V'Zahav. But we'll leave that for tomorrow night. The iniquities of Shlomo HaMelech.